Ambassador Thelavix pressed her four hands together in a gesture of nervous anticipation as the transport ship docked with humanity's Centaurus station. Her iridescent scales shifted colors rapidly, betraying her anxiety despite years of diplomatic training. As the first Silurian ambassador to Earth's primary diplomatic outpost, she carried the weight of her species' future relations with this enigmatic race. The docking procedure completed with a soft hiss, and Thelavix gathered her ceremonial robes around her tall, slender frame. The preliminary briefings had warned her about human security protocols, but nothing could have prepared her for what awaited beyond the airlock. Armed personnel stood at every junction, their weapons prominently displayed rather than concealed. What struck her most wasn't just their presence, but their casual demeanor, as if carrying devices of death was as natural as wearing clothes. Her species had evolved away from physical combat millennia ago, developing powerful psychic abilities instead. The sight of so much physical weaponry felt primitive, yet there was an undeniable sophistication to their equipment. Ambassador Thelavix, welcome to Centaurus Station. A human female approached, wearing what appeared to be a formal diplomatic uniform. But Thelavix's enhanced vision caught the subtle bulge of a concealed weapon beneath the crisp fabric. I'm Director Sarah Chen. We're honored to host the first Silurian representative. Thelavix bowed in the traditional human manner she'd studied. The honor is mine, Director Chen, though I admit to some curiosity about your security arrangements. Chen's smile remained diplomatic, but her eyes sharpened with interest. You've noticed our staff are armed. I understand this might seem unusual to many species. Perhaps we could discuss this during your station tour. It's quite relevant to understanding human culture. As they walked through the station's sprawling corridors, Thelavix observed more armed personnel, but also civilians carrying weapons. A group of human children passed by, chattering excitedly about something called target practice. Her scales flickered to a pale blue of confusion. Director Chen, are those younglings being trained in combat? Not combat specifically, Chen explained, guiding them past a transparent wall revealing what appeared to be a recreational facility. Inside, humans of various ages were engaged in what looked like weapon-based sports. We believe in familiarizing our children with tools of defense early, under careful supervision. It's part of our educational philosophy. Tools of defense, Thelavix repeated thoughtfully. Yet I see no immediate threats requiring such preparation. Chen's expression grew serious. Ambassador, humanity learned long ago that threats don't announce themselves in advance. Our history is marked by moments where being prepared meant the difference between survival and extinction. But there's more to it than mere survival. They entered a quiet observation deck overlooking Earth's azure sphere below. Chen gestured to the view. Every weapon you see on this station represents thousands of years of human innovation, culture, and yes, conflict. But also protection, sport, and tradition. We're not just armed, we're prepared. There's a crucial difference. Thelavix's scales shifted to a deep purple of contemplation. My preliminary reports suggested humans were paradoxical, capable of both great violence and remarkable compassion. Perhaps these aspects are more intertwined than we initially believed. Precisely, Chen nodded, which is why we're particularly interested in establishing relations with the Silurians. Your species chose a different evolutionary path, developing mental defenses instead of physical ones. We believe there's much we could learn from each other. A sudden commotion drew their attention. A security team rushed past, weapons ready but controlled. Chen's hand instinctively moved toward her concealed weapon, then relaxed as her communicator chirped with an all-clear signal. Just a routine drill, she explained. We run them regularly to maintain readiness. Thelavix's scales rippled with newfound understanding. You treat weapons as we treat our mental disciplines, not just as tools, but as extensions of yourselves, requiring constant refinement and respect. That's a remarkably insightful comparison, Chen said, genuine surprise coloring her voice. Most species either fear our armed nature or dismiss it as primitive. Few try to understand it. Understanding is why I'm here, Thilovix replied, her scales settling into a calm green. Though I suspect this is just the beginning of what I have to learn about humanity. Indeed, Chen smiled. And speaking of learning, would you be interested in observing one of our traditional martial arts classes? It might help illustrate how we've integrated weapon training with philosophy and cultural expression. As they headed toward the training facilities, Thilovix reflected that her mission might be more complex and more fascinating than she'd anticipated. The humans' relationship with weapons clearly went far deeper than simple violence. Perhaps understanding this paradox was key to understanding humanity itself. The holographic display cast a soft blue glow across the archive chamber as Director Chen activated the historical database. Ambassador Thilovix watched, her scales shimmering with anticipation, as three-dimensional images materialized in the air before them. To understand our relationship with weapons, Chen began, you need to understand our path to the stars. She gestured, and the hologram shifted to show primitive humans wielding crude tools. We weren't born with natural defenses like many species. No claws, no significant strength, no protective shells. Just our minds and our hands. The images shifted through time, showing the evolution of human warfare. Thilovix observed with growing fascination as simple spears gave way to increasingly sophisticated implements of destruction. Her species had few records of their own military history, having evolved toward mental combat and defense so early in their development. But here's what many species miss. Chen continued, freezing the display on an image of ancient humans gathered around a fire, weapons laid carefully beside them. These tools weren't just for fighting. They were for hunting, for protection against predators, for securing resources our communities needed to survive. They became integral to our social structure. The scene changed to show various human civilizations through time. Each culture developed its own traditions around weapons. Some, like the samurai of feudal Japan, built entire philosophical systems around their use. The hologram displayed an ancient warrior performing an intricate sword ritual. Others turned them into art forms or sporting events. Thilovix's scales rippled with deep blue interest. Like the children we saw earlier. Exactly, Chen nodded. But our history isn't just about the weapons themselves. It's about why we kept developing them, even after we'd conquered our natural predators. The display shifted to scenes of human conflict through the ages. Thilovix felt her scales pale at the scale of destruction, but she forced herself to watch. Understanding required facing uncomfortable truths. We fought ourselves, Chen said quietly. Tribe against tribe, nation against nation. Each conflict drove innovation, not just in weapons, but in medicine, technology, logistics. Even space travel owes much to military research. Yet you survived, Thilovix observed. Many species destroy themselves once they develop sufficient weapons technology. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. We came close, several times, but something interesting happened along the way. The hologram showed scenes of international cooperation, joint military exercises, peacekeeping missions. We learned that the same tools that could destroy us could also unite us. Shared defense became a bridge between cultures. The images shifted to humanity's first steps into space. When we reached for the stars, we carried these lessons with us. The weapons weren't just weapons anymore. They were symbols of our responsibility to protect, to preserve, to defend not just ourselves but others. Thilovix watched as the display showed human ships defending alien vessels from pirates, human security forces evacuating civilian populations from natural disasters, joint human-alien military exercises. Your species seems to have found a balance between the capacity for violence and the choice to use it wisely. Not always, Chen admitted. We still struggle with that balance, but we've learned that being prepared for conflict doesn't mean seeking it out. Sometimes, the most effective weapon is the one you never have to use. A soft chime interrupted them. A notification on Chen's communicator. She checked it briefly, then turned back to Thilovix. Speaking of which, Would you be interested in observing our response team training? It might help illustrate how we've adapted our military traditions for space-based operations. Filovix's scales shifted to a curious yellow-green. I would be honored. Though I must admit, Director, each answer you provide seems to generate more questions. Chen smiled. That's the mark of a good diplomat, Ambassador. And to be honest, explaining our culture to you is helping me see it through fresh eyes as well. As they left the archive chamber, Filovix found her thoughts dwelling on the complex tapestry of human history she'd witnessed. A species that had turned its very vulnerability into strength, its weapons into tools of peace. Perhaps there was more to learn from humans than her people had initially believed. The station's corridors seemed different now, the armed personnel less threatening and more purposeful. Each weapon represented not just potential violence, but thousands of years of human evolution, adaptation, and hard-won wisdom. The true mystery, she was beginning to realize, wasn't why humans were armed, but how they had learned to carry such power with responsibility. The alert klaxon caught Filovix mid-sentence during her tour of the station's cultural center. Her scales instinctively flashed warning colors as Director Chen's communicator erupted with urgent chatter. The human's reaction was immediate but controlled, her earlier warmth replaced by professional focus. Security breach in Sector 7, Chen explained, already moving. Ambassador, I apologize, but this might be illuminating. Would you care to observe from our secure command center? Filovix followed as Chen led her through a series of secure corridors. The station's armed personnel moved with practiced precision, but what struck the ambassador wasn't their efficiency. It was their coordination. Each team they passed seemed to communicate with minimal words, moving in patterns that spoke of long practice and deep trust. The command center hummed with activity. Holographic displays showed multiple angles of a sealed corridor where a malfunctioning maintenance bot had accidentally triggered the station's quarantine protocols. Several engineers were trapped inside with rapidly depleting air supplies. Watch, Chen said softly as a response team approached the scene. This is where you'll see the true purpose of our preparation. The team moved like a single organism. Their weapons, Filovix noted, remained holstered as they deployed cutting tools and emergency breathing apparatus instead. One member began bypassing the security lockdown, while others prepared emergency medical equipment. Your warriors, Filovix observed. They're not just soldiers, are they? Chen smiled. Every station security member is trained in multiple disciplines. Combat, yes, but also rescue operations, emergency medicine, engineering basics. The weapons are just one tool among many. As if to emphasize her point, the team successfully breached the sealed section without firing a single shot. They extracted the engineers efficiently, treating minor injuries on the spot. The entire operation had taken less than 15 minutes. Impressive, Filovix admitted, her scales shifting to admiring gold. Though I noticed none of the trapped engineers panicked, they seemed to trust implicitly that help would come. That's the real strength of our system, Chen explained as they left the command center. It's not just about having weapons or trained personnel. It's about creating an environment where everyone knows they're protected, allowing them to focus on their work without fear. They passed through the station's main promenade, where life had already returned to normal. A weapons instructor was demonstrating traditional sword forms to a mixed group of humans and aliens, their movements more dance than combat. Nearby, a craftsman carefully engraved designs on what appeared to be ceremonial daggers. You see, Chen gestured to the scenes around them. Weapons permeate our culture, but not always as tools of war. That sword demonstration, it's a 400-year-old art form. Those daggers, they're ceremonial pieces for a coming-of-age ritual. We've transformed these tools into symbols of responsibility, achievement, and cultural identity. A group of station security personnel passed by, nodding respectfully to Chen. Filovix noticed something she'd missed before. The way they carried themselves spoke not of aggression, but of readiness to protect. Director, she said slowly, I begin to understand. Your species doesn't arm itself out of fear or aggression, but out of a deep-seated need to be prepared, to protect not just yourselves, but others. Precisely, Chen confirmed. Though it took us centuries of hard lessons to reach this point, our history is filled with examples of weapons being misused, of power being abused. We carry those lessons with us into space. They paused at a viewport, watching as a civilian transport docked under the watchful eyes of station security. Each weapon you see represents a commitment, Chen continued. To protect, to serve, to uphold the principles we've learned through trial and error. It's why we're so careful about who carries them and how they're trained. Filovix's scales rippled with thoughtful purple. My people have always viewed physical weapons as primitive compared to our mental abilities. But perhaps we've been too quick to judge. There's an elegance to your approach, turning tools of destruction into instruments of protection and cultural expression. A soft chime interrupted them. Another notification. Chen checked it and smiled. Perfect timing. The station's annual security and emergency response demonstration is about to begin. It's quite a spectacle, combining traditional weapon arts with modern emergency procedures. Would you like to observe? I would be honored, Filovix replied, realizing that each new revelation about human culture seemed to peel back another layer of complexity. The mystery wasn't just in why humans carried weapons, but in how they had transformed them from simple tools into something far more profound. The first warning came not from the station's sophisticated sensor array, but from an old-fashioned human intuition. Filovix noticed Director Chen stiffen slightly during the security demonstration, her hand moving to her communicator before it even chimed. The ambassador's scales flickered with concern as she sensed the shift in the human's demeanor. Something's wrong, Filovix stated, not asked. Her diplomatic training had taught her to read even the subtlest of human expressions. 3 unidentified vessels just dropped out of FTL, Chen confirmed, her voice low and steady. They're not responding to hails, and their approach vector is aggressive. She touched her communicator. Command, initiate protocol Aegis. This is not a drill. The transformation of Centaurus Station was remarkable to witness. The civilian areas quickly but calmly began to evacuate, guided by security personnel who seemed to materialize from nowhere. The weapons demonstration participants smoothly transitioned from ceremonial displays to actual defensive positions. Wrexham pirates, Chen explained as they hurried to the command center. They've been getting bolder lately, but attacking the human diplomatic station. This is new. The command center's main display showed 3 predatory-looking ships approaching, their design optimized for swift strikes and quick retreats. Filovix had heard of the Wrexham, cybernetically enhanced raiders who preyed on civilian shipping, notorious for their brutality. They're targeting our civilian dock, one of the operators reported. 2 passenger liners are currently moored there. Filovix felt her scales pale. Those ships carry over 3,000 beings, including children from 12 different species. Chen's expression hardened. Not on our watch. She activated the station-wide comm. All hands, battle stations. Civilian protection is priority 1. Theta Squad, deploy to the civilian dock. Engineering, prepare for potential hull breach scenarios. The pirates launched their first attack, expecting to find a diplomatic station poorly defended. Instead, their initial volley met a sophisticated shield system that seemed to anticipate their targeting patterns. The station's response was immediate and precise. Those defense turrets, Filovix observed, they're not targeting the ship's weapons. No, Chen confirmed as they watched the carefully placed shots disable the pirates' engines and communication arrays. We're not looking to destroy them. We want them alive to face justice and to send a message to others who might try this. The battle, if it could be called that, was remarkably one-sided. The station's defensive systems, which had appeared purely decorative during peaceful times, revealed their true sophistication. But it was the human response teams that truly impressed Filovix. When one of the pirate ships managed to launch a boarding pod, the station's security forces responded with overwhelming coordination. The ambassador watched through security feeds as the teams moved in perfect synchronization, using non-lethal weapons to subdue the cybernetically enhanced raiders without a single civilian casualty. "Your people," Thelovix noted, her scales shifting to admiring gold. "They're showing remarkable restraint. The Raxan are known for fighting to the death. Just because we can use lethal force doesn't mean we should," Chen replied, directing medical teams to treat the captured pirates. "Every life we spare is a potential lesson in humanity's approach to conflict." The last pirate ship surrendered after witnessing the fate of its companions. As the all-clear signal sounded throughout the station, Thelovix noticed something remarkable. The civilian population was already returning to their normal routines, showing complete trust in their protectors. "You know," Chen said as they watched the cleanup operations begin, "many species ask why we maintain such strong defensive capabilities during peacetime. This is why. Not just to protect ourselves, but to protect others who need it." Thelovix's scales rippled with deep understanding. "Your weapons aren't just tools of war. They're instruments of peace, wielded with precision and restraint." "Precisely," Chen smiled. "Speaking of which, would you like to observe the debriefing? I think you'll find our post-incident protocols as revealing as our response procedures." As they headed to the debriefing room, Thelovix reflected on how this incident had demonstrated everything she'd learned about humans so far: their preparation, their restraint, their commitment to protecting others. The station's weapons had served not to destroy, but to preserve life and maintain peace. For the first time, she truly understood why humans carried their weapons so openly. They weren't displaying tools of war, but rather badges of responsibility, a visible promise to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. The Grand Chamber of the Unified Systems Council fell silent as Ambassador Thelovix took her place at the speaking podium. Her scales, normally shifting with subtle emotion, maintained a steady, confident blue as she faced the assembled representatives of 200 species. "Esteemed colleagues," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space, "I stand before you today to present my findings on humanity's military culture and to challenge some of our most basic assumptions about our newest potential allies." The holographic displays activated, showing scenes from Centaurus Station. "When I first arrived at the human diplomatic station, I saw what many of you see: a species seemingly obsessed with weapons, surrounding themselves with tools of war even in times of peace. I expected to find a culture dominated by violence and aggression." Her scales rippled with amusement. "I have never been more wrong in my diplomatic career." The displays showed footage from the pirate attack, focusing not on the combat, but on the coordination between different teams, the protection of civilians, the medical treatment of captured raiders. What I discovered was not a species in love with violence, but one that has learned the true cost of unpreparedness. Humans don't carry weapons because they want to use them. They carry them because they understand that peace must be guarded. She gestured to a new series of images: children at target practice, ceremonial weapon dances, rescue operations. Their weapon culture is not about destruction, but about responsibility. Every human who carries a weapon has undergone extensive training, not just in its use, but in when not to use it. They have transformed tools of war into symbols of protection. The chamber murmured as she displayed statistics from the pirate incident. During a recent attack on their diplomatic station, humans demonstrated both overwhelming defensive capability and remarkable restraint. They neutralized a serious threat while minimizing casualties on both sides. This is not the behavior of a violence-obsessed species. Thelovix paused, letting her scales shift to a thoughtful purple. Many of us have evolved beyond physical weapons. My own people developed mental defenses millennia ago. We've prided ourselves on this advancement, seeing it as a sign of superior civilization. Her scales flushed with humility. But watching humans defend not just themselves but others during the pirate attack, I realized something profound. They haven't clung to weapons out of primitive instinct, but out of a deep sense of duty. They see themselves as guardians, not just warriors. The display showed scenes from the station's daily life. Armed security personnel helping lost children, weapons instructors teaching alien students, emergency teams running drills. Humans have taken their greatest vulnerability, their lack of natural defenses, and turned it into their greatest strength. They've developed a culture of preparedness that extends far beyond mere combat. Their weapons are not just tools, she continued, but repositories of history, art, and philosophy. Each one represents thousands of years of human evolution, innovation, and hard-learned lessons about power and responsibility. The chamber was completely silent now, all eyes fixed on her presentation. I recommend not only accepting humans into the unified systems, but actively seeking their participation in our collective defense initiatives. Their unique perspective on protection and preparedness could benefit us all. She straightened, her scales settling into a determined green. But more than that, I suggest we re-examine our own prejudices about what constitutes advancement. The humans have not escaped their violent past by denying it, but by learning from it, by transforming it into something noble. In conclusion, Felovix's scales shifted to a confident gold. I believe humanity's armed nature is not a liability, but an asset. They have mastered the paradox that has challenged so many species: how to maintain peace through strength, how to wield power with wisdom, and how to transform tools of war into instruments of protection. The chamber erupted in discussion as she stepped down from the podium. Her communicator chimed. A message from Director Chen, watching the live feed. You understand us better than many of our own people do. Felovix smiled, her scales rippling with pride as she composed her reply. Understanding was only the beginning. Now comes the interesting part, helping others see what I've seen. That humanity's greatest weapon isn't their technology or their training, but their unwavering commitment to protecting life in all its forms. As the council chamber buzzed with debate, Felovix knew her report would spark controversy, but she also knew that the next time a crisis threatened the peace of the galaxy, people would remember her words, and perhaps when they saw human ships arriving to help, they would understand what she had learned, that sometimes the most powerful force for peace is a guardian who stands ready to defend it.